So welcome to It's Not All About the Numbers, the leadership podcast that doesn't just focus on the bottom line. Hi, my name is Chris, and that is Mike.
Hi, everyone.
And our co-host today is Olivia Wing, Community Success Manager from Gen CFO Community and Gen Z Aficionado. Welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Happy to be here, guys.
I think I meant to say aficionado there, but anyway, enough about that. How's your week been, Mike?
I was thinking about this. So a lift behind the curtain. So this is our second podcast this week. So I was thinking, what do I say in this that I didn't say in the last one? Because I'm still on the Depeche Mode buzz. So the answer is it's definitely not Easter anymore. And so far since we last recorded, I've been so busy making sure that I find time to go outside. So actually getting out with the dogs, trying to stop them rolling in interesting smells.
Let's not go there. Good stuff. Well, yeah, it is a bit of a peek behind the curtain, and we almost have to make it up sometimes, don't we? But Liv, how about yourself? Been to any concerts? Been traveling anywhere?
Well, I have actually just got back from Rome, so I've only been back a day. So personal news-wise, that was very fun. And in the short amount of professional news I have this week, I had a very, very full inbox, which comes part and parcel of working in a community.
Absolutely, yeah. Busy times, and it's great to have you on. Obviously, from our company. But we're not going to talk about Gen CFO today. We're going to talk about lots of other stuff. So my week, I'm still struggling to do it, but I have been to the gym 7:30 in the morning, route to my awards DJ in June because I can't fit into it quite yet. I had a tricky week, if I'm honest, because we had my mother-in-law staying, no jokes allowed. And you know, she's very frail and she's quite old, so there's a lot of juggling with very young kids and 2 dogs and all the rest of it. So, lastly, I really enjoyed, and I should mention this, doing a few things sort of speaker wise over the last couple of weeks, which led to an opinion piece that I wrote for Gen CFO, which is all about if your boss can't talk tech, then maybe you should think about leaving the company that you're in. And equally, if you're employing someone and the employee can't talk tech, then maybe you should think twice about recruiting them. And this is me paraphrasing a lot of people in those conversations that I've had over the last few weeks. So, yeah, interesting stuff.
Now, I was just thinking back to some of the work that I've done, and it's actually, from my perspective, is how do you help people that you're working with talk about the things you want to talk about? So everybody can talk tech, they just might not think that they can. I know what you're getting at.
Yeah, I've heard you correct many a person who says, I'm not a data person. And it's like, what are you talking about? You know, you use this calendar invite to get on this call. That's data. Anyway, yeah. What's been happening this week? Well, it's been great to work with Liv over the last couple of years. And Liv, you, as we said at the start, with my tongue-tied aficionado, I've done it again, aficionado. You are a Gen Zer, and I am not, definitely. And I noticed an article this week about Gen Zs being less happy in previous generations. And it seems to come down to one thing, which is being part of a purpose-driven organization. And if you are part of a purpose-driven organization, then Gen Z seem to be happy. Do you recognize that? And I'm going to ask you rather than Mike, because we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to Gen Z.
Sure. I think there's a couple of things to unpick with that research as well. Like just preliminarily, like when you said that they have said that they're less happy than other generations, just full stop. I think that partly, obviously, and I will get to that, I have seen, examples of that desire for purpose. But equally, I think Gen Z and people around me and people in my peer group are much more open about kind of doing away with that stiff upper lip and being very open about things they're not happy about. And they have a lot more kind of set boxes to tick when they're looking for a role, when they're looking to change roles. And I think one of those is purpose. And I think it's kind of part of wanting to make a difference. I think the kind of environment that we're in, the environment we've kind of gone through, there's been so much uncertainty in the environment that wanting to make a difference however we can, I think is a really big thing for us.
Yeah.
And having a purpose to get behind makes it easier to feel like you're making a difference. Like, for example, even in myself, like I feel like the work that I do with people, I feel like I'm making a difference there and I can get behind kind of moving towards tech and moving towards, putting people together. That for me constitutes making a difference. So yeah, I can see it myself and yeah, around me.
I wonder if one of the things that's changed is the career paths and like the whole job for life versus there being no such thing anymore. And I wondered, I just wanted to ask is, do you think that some of what you've just described is where people get reward from now is different to where potentially people got reward from before?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of conversations around kind of obviously we know the economic situation has changed, a lot of being able to afford things has changed. So I think especially, people immediately around me, I can speak for them, kind of short-term gratification, not necessarily short term, but is more important. So yeah, I think it is feeling like every day you're going and you're doing something that will make you feel happier. And that can even be, I think, as small as kind of working arrangements, like wanting to work in a hybrid environment. That's just a small thing you can do for yourself. Making sure the job you have gives you career support or mental health support I think would probably be more important than for a lot of people than finding a job that they feel like the reward would be staying there for a long time and building up that kind of rapport with the team and building up your benefits that way. So yeah, no, I definitely do think that that is the case.
You mentioned another part of it, which was kind of this generation not really believing in the stiff upper lip. I can't remember how you quite sort of focused on that, but what's your sort of understanding of that? Because that sounds like quite a big change, actually. Being quite stoic in the past, I think, has got a lot of people through things. I'm actually still quite a believer in stoicism and the stiff upper lip in a way, not in the sort of pompous English way, but just in an approach to leadership. But what do you see happening with the Gen Zs?
I think because of the era that we're in, where we have access to so much information, we expect that to kind of continue in the workplace. Like I would expect, and I do receive a lot of transparency from my team and from people who I report to, which helps build up that psychological safety for me. Because I want to know what's going on. I want to know why things are happening. Whereas before, I think generations that maybe didn't have that like immediate access to anything they want using the internet, or the expectation that they should be, shown what's happening with things, whether that comes from politics or, work or anything. If you were in a different generation, you probably wouldn't expect that. So it's not something that, you want. And transparency goes both ways. So I think getting rid of that upper lip yourself and being transparent enough to say, I'm not happy about something. You can complain online, you can complain in person, but people are there, that you're going to find a community that could support you in that. So yeah, I think that transparency and that importance of being honest about how you feel about things has become a lot more important because we can see that it makes change. Like Greta Thunberg, for example, very young Gen Z, she's making change because she's being very transparent that she's extremely unhappy with how things were happening. And, I know people who have been in jobs who've been happy to tell their boss openly, I'm not comfortable with this. Can it change? And it does. So yeah, I think it's the transparency which kind of negates that stoicism, keeping it all inside.
It's really interesting. I'm listening to this and reflecting on a conversation I had when I was away with school friends last week. So my dad was a policeman, and what my best mates from school is a policeman now, and we were talking about the differences. So police in the 70s versus police in the 2020s, and what the differences are. And there's lots of them that you can probably imagine. But underpinning it is that culture change takes time. So I think that, Chris and I are obviously older and in a different gen, but we're almost like observing this culture change from like our parents who the stiff upper lip, you barely got a pat on the head sometimes if you did a good job, versus now to this kind of a much more effusive society. It feels like sometimes, and actually, so we're like a snapshot at where we grew up. And it's almost like it's going to be the same for you as you grow older. The people that come after you, they're going to be, you know, digital natives for like since the moment that they were born. And it's just going to be completely different. And it's almost like what we're talking about is that observation, right? Is that culture change takes time and it happens slowly behind the scenes. And actually, the people that we work with are snapshots of their childhood and their growing up that we experience.
There is a slight difference between the kind of generational gap from us to before, and I think that's that access to information thing again. And there's something that I don't know if you've heard, you probably have heard the term, but micro trends. It's something that there's a lot of discourse around for people of my generation, where I think particularly fashion, but there are other things too. The trends are moving exceedingly fast and faster than they've ever moved before. And I think that that kind of goes into culture change as well. I think you can see things changing very quickly. Attitudes towards things can change in almost a moment's notice. And it's all documented as well. So I think the change for people, the generation coming up from us, they're on phones, like you said, they're seeing everything we're doing and they're reacting off of it. And I think that will kind of expedite that change.
Speed of change is a really interesting one because I think you're right. Things can happen very quickly now. You know, we report on it quite a lot on here, and I was doing a presentation a couple of weeks ago about how, you know, ChatGPT got 1 million users in 5 days. Like, you know, it's bonkers, right? When you look at the speed of change, and that's obviously that's going to impact on culture big time. In fact, a colleague of ours was talking about a situation, Liv, where, you know, we sort of use apps, but actually now to, you know, her sister's generation, apps are too slow because I have to download an app to then use the app. So how can I shortcut the download? So it's just the acceleration of change is just, you know, it's crazy. I suppose the point that I was making around Stoicism, though, is it's, you know, Stoicism is a philosophy, right? That's been around, you know, for millennia. And I wonder whether that some of these philosophies are just, you know, never going to come back in fashion, or do you see it as cyclical? This turning into quite a big question, actually. But, you know, is it all about purpose, or do you think that attitudes can vary towards, you know, control? Because Stoicism, in effect, is controlling what you can control and sort of taking everything else on the chin, in a nutshell.
Just, I mean, I think one of my thoughts on that I think it'd be depending on if we're talking about in terms of job roles and stuff like that, industry and kind of sectors would have a really big impact on that, because I don't think you can make change in certain industries like that. So, you know, because I'm in a small business, I'm in a kind of creative, almost creative space, I am more able to kind of be open about things I want. And I think that's the same for quite a few industries. I think tech industry is quite modern ones. Whereas I know people who are in traditional industries who could never even dream of being anything but very controlled, not showing any emotion at work, not being open about things, not thinking outside of the box. They have to just do things the way that they're told to do them. And obviously I understand Stoicism is about self-control, but I think they have to exert a lot of that just to be, you know, continue in that industry space. And I have, you know, you're not actually seeing that much change in some of those industries like law, some of the bigger consulting firms. I think there's a very set way of doing things.
I'm going to push just a little bit on that, because I think that what we're talking about, we're talking very well in generalizations here. And I think that culture changes at different speeds in different places. So I know friends who are barristers, and actually one of my best friends went off on maternity leave as a barrister and then came back. And in that period that she was off, which was like 4 or 5 years, they went from being completely paper based to being completely iPad based. So the change is happening, and it just happens differently in different parts of society at different speeds. So I think that I'm just being cautious around grand generalization. So I think stoicism's important, but also activism's important, also radicalism's important, and you see them in different places. And the thing, you know, you had rock and roll, then punk rock happened, right? Why? It wasn't everybody went suddenly punk rock. And I think it's the same is true with technology. We've got this technological revolution, but not everybody's at the same pace of change with it, although it's changing fast. So yeah.
That was quite a deep start, wasn't it? we can try and lighten the mood now. So yeah, but this is what we're all about. It's not all about the numbers, and this is definitely one of those conversations. I do wonder, though, Liv, just to push one final point on that. Gen Z being happier with a purpose-led organization, and as you said, there are some traditional industries, and arguably the industry that I'm in, accounting as a profession is very traditional. Do you see those now as less attractive generally to the Gen Zers?
I think there are some things, given the environment that we're in, that can supersede the want for something like that because it's not necessarily a need. So, say you're in a position where you need money, you need a benefit in particular, like some sort of subsidy for a travel cost or something, that I think for some people who are in difficult positions, it might supersede that for them. I also think people might be more willing to compromise on certain elements of things, certain needs for themselves, if they can get a foot in. I think there are some very competitive industries. I know people who have sort of separated some of the things they want so that they can get a foot in the door, as it were, because the market is very difficult, in England at least. But I think purpose kind of can come in multiple ways. So, I think ESG stuff around that, I know it's a buzzword, but I think it's still very important for people. I know someone who was working as an analyst and he just felt a bit lost, and then he did some work around the ESG space, asked to move into that, and now he's really enjoying what he's doing, even though he wasn't necessarily enjoying it before. Because I think that ESG element came in enough for him to feel a bit of purpose. So yeah, I think there are elements of things where people might want to compromise or need to compromise, but generally I think it still can, in different ways, feed into your decision, maybe more than it has done for previous generations.
Just wanted to sort of link all that to your role with Gen CFO. So kind of what have you been doing within what's a community success manager do, and how does that link to like the things that you've said that you look for?
So I kind of almost fell into the community space. It's not something I even knew kind of was a path option. But I was working at Gen CFO for a while, and Chris helped me kind of come to this kind of new version of my role. And largely what I do is just sort of support the community, however that may look, whether that's from retention to growth, anything like that, helping people make the most of their experience with us. And for me personally, I kind of, through my time at Gen CFO, I've realized how much engaging with people is good for me. It kind of fulfills me in various ways. I think I'm quite an extrovert, although that was a thing that Chris didn't realize about me for a very long time. But I do get energy of kind of having positive interactions with people and sharing the positive message here. And then in terms of purpose, is like in a more kind of making a difference way, like I mentioned at the beginning, I feel like Gen CFO does do good for the industry. I can see it. I think a lot of people in financial leadership positions can get quite lonely, especially when they're more forward thinking, because there are some, there's several elements of this industry where people are still kind of working on that pace of change that we just talked about, and helping them spread that within their communities, helping them realize if a role's not working for them because of how, they're not fulfilled in that tech way, that kind of forward thinking way. For me, it makes me feel good knowing that I'm helping in that way, and also making connections between people. I've often seen things after our events where people have been hanging out, where they've been sharing ideas as a result of meeting at one of our events, or through us helping them connect. So making those connections with people, seeing people having a better time in their career, better time, in networking, makes me feel, fulfilled, I think.
Chris and I quite often on this talk about the value of peer learning, and that actually the peer-to-peer learning is really important in this space. But what you've just described is that itself takes effort, and you need some kind of support to make those links. And actually there's quite a lot of reward in seeing those links happen and develop and come about. But yeah, I think that quite often when we're talking about it, Chris, we kind of almost underestimate in the way that we kind of just throw it out there, peer learning, that there is an effort that's needed.
There definitely is. And funny enough, before this, we had our lunch and learn for the for this month. And there was one question around how do we get the community to engage more, because we have thousands of people interested in what we do, but the people who actually show up regularly is actually quite a small number in relation to that. And it is acknowledging you've got to make this as easy as possible for people. You've got to show the value. And also I think, Liv, it'd be great to get your opinion on this. And thank you for saying all those things. I didn't pay a mic, I swear. It's there is an effort required, but there is a huge amount of value that comes from those interactions, and it's difficult to explain them unless you experience it. It's like, I don't know, going to a concert or a West End show. If Mike, if you were talking about Depeche Mode to me and I wasn't a fan, am I going to get that sort of sense of how amazing the concert was? Even if I was a fan, how far am I going to go on that? So I actually need to go.
But it's back to the dynamic nature. I think that what you described brilliantly in the first conversation, Liv, but also linking through to this, is it's the dynamism that's needed. It's not one thing. Reward comes from different things for different people, and actually it's almost you're playing that into the community, is that you might want this or you might want that, or you might just need this, and that flexibility is almost the benefit of community now, right?
Yeah, I think, and when people experience that sense of community and that kind of people around them that think the same way, they end up evangelizing on our behalf. Like, I've often seen, people at events, if there's a guest there, kind of the members swarm them and tell them positive things, and it's really great to see that, because I know that they've felt the impact of having that kind of supportive community around them. And I see it, in people leaving comments after things that we've done, people emailing me directly, just letting me know that, that sense of community around them, that community that works for them in the way that they need it to work, because people have different needs from different communities.
And what's really interesting, just to finish sort of laboring the point I'm making, is what you're describing is reward, right? You're getting a reward in your job that's not just your pay packet. And I'm trusting that when Chris says he's not paying you, he is paying you, but just not for that statement.
Yeah.
But the reward that you're getting an extra reward over and above your salary from that interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, so it's that purpose thing again, where it's not even something I realized was a purpose for me until I kind of thought about it, which I've actually thought about it before this conversation, several times while working here, that I actually can quite easily back what we do. It's very easy for me to feel passionate about what we do, because not only do I get the reward from, like you said, seeing those people interact, knowing I'm making an impact in that way, I also do genuinely believe in the mission that we have here at Gen CFO about moving people towards the future, helping people find connections of the same way. And just seeing the growth in the community is a reward in itself. Yeah, because I know that I've made that difference in some ways, and I know that that difference is positive.
This is all lovely. I feel like it's a bit of a love-in for Gen CFO, which is great. But so I'm going to keep going. Liv, you mentioned at the start where you've been on a bit of a journey at Gen CFO, and even to the point where we've been having discussions about your role and moving the role forward quite a lot. But how did you kind of get from that day one to where you are today?
So I came
you
across.
You can tell me all the bad things if you want,
and the millions of listeners.
Yeah, I'll tell everyone who's listening in. So I came across Gen CFO almost by chance. Just I was a graduate. I was looking for a role that kind of appealed to at least some of my interests. You know how it is. You can't get everything you want when you're a graduate. But I saw this role and I thought it was quite interesting. Initially, I was just a marketing and editorial assistant, and I did a lot of actually writing at the beginning. I did a lot of writing for. We still do a lot of editorial content, but I wrote quite a lot of stuff near the beginning around research reports we'd done, helped me kind of get acquainted with the ACCA. We did a report with the ACCA, which is the industry body that we work with a lot, and that helped me kind of get an understanding of who everyone was in this environment, what everything was going on, because I had no knowledge of anything, barely knew what a CFO was. So writing those articles and doing that research helped me kind of understand that. And then I think I just kept getting hungry for more. I always wanted to be able to do more. I like kind of having agency, and that's something I've always valued in roles that I have, is having agency to do what I need to do, be it knowing I have someone behind me.
I remember it well.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a really interesting point, because we talk about strengths on here. For the last couple of podcasts, we talk about strength. One of your biggest strengths by far is your writing ability. But what was interesting in that sort of conversation was, Chris, I want to stop writing. So what was happening then? Because for me, as a manager, I was like, wow, just keep going. That you're strong at this, keep going. But something changed, right?
Yeah, and I think this kind of harks back to what I was saying earlier. Like, I've never been very afraid to ask for what I want, and I think I had it in my head for a while that I kind of wanted to say, I want to explore more things. I want to move towards the people side. I could hear the conversations that were being had by Chris and see them at the events, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I think that I could provide some value there. I think I would enjoy providing the value there. So writing is something, yeah, I've done a lot of writing in my time, but it's not something that I find particularly stimulating. I think because it's so, behind the scenes. It's something that's being done, not engaging with the people. I think that you can, and as we know, many people throughout history have made a lot of difference in things with writing, but I think I find it easier to make those changes in using, me, using my personality, using my voice. So I think, yeah, and then obviously Chris gave me the opportunity to move away from that, move kind of closer towards community behaviors. And I think my confidence just grew and grew in terms of understanding who is in this community, how I can support them, how I can change things. And then ultimately, I became the community success manager, and it's been nearly 2 years now. So yeah, I think it was a good choice.
What's really I really like in what you've just described, Lily, is we've had a number of conversations with different people on the podcast where, when we've asked them, how have you got to doing what you're doing, they've basically said, we've followed our nose. We were doing something, and then we've gone and done that because we like doing that, so we've done that, and then we've gone and done that because we like doing that, and we've done that, and now I'm here doing this stuff, and I'm successful at the stuff that I'm doing. And what's really nice to hear is that within your work environment, you've been given the same opportunity within a role. Because I don't think that often happens. I think often when you're in a role, that role is defined as a box. You're in it, and if you wanted to change what you were doing, you'd have to change roles. Literally move jobs, move companies, move organizations. So I'm just sort of harking back to that initial conversation around Gen Z and what Gen Z expects. Do you think that flexibility has been what's kept you interested? You have had that ability to change.
I think loads of stuff about Gen CFO is great, but the flexibility has been fantastic. Nobody I know has as much of an ability to do that as me, I don't think. But I think part of that comes from it being a smaller organization. And I think initially I thought, and a lot of other people I graduated with were very keen to work in enterprise, work in these huge companies. But when I look around and I look at the people who've joined sort of startups or smaller companies like I have, they've had the best experience. They've had the best career kind of support, best mentorship, best benefits in that way, in kind of discovering what they want and knowing that there's someone there to support them in that kind of thing. And I think because we're kind of I know there's always entrepreneurship, but I think that there's kind of a real light shone on entrepreneurship nowadays. Like, Stephen Bartlett, there's Dragon's Den, there's The Apprentice. I know those are kind of just reality TV stuff. But at the same time, I think that it's really glorified. You see it on TikTok, you see it on YouTube. And in an era with startups being more common, I think it is good because I think that it, can give people the same experience that I had. I mean, I know it's not universally good. I'm not sure. But I personally, I haven't heard anyone in my peer group have a negative time in a smaller business. And I think that flexibility that you mentioned that is amazing for me is possible because of that environment. Yeah.
I was just wondering whether you need to explain what TikTok is to Chris. Chris, do you know what TikTok is?
Chris knows some stuff, but he thought
I'm
memes were memes. Memes, was
me-
it? Memes.
memes, I think I called them. But
Memes. That's what
anyway,
it was. Memes.
God, yeah. Anyway,
Can't let you get away with it being too much of a
well,
lovely man.
exactly. I took a lot of praise there, so
Yeah.
I'll take that. No, and credit to you, Liv. I think, but going back to that journey, I do think there was an interesting point on it where I saw a strength in you, which I was, as a manager, looking to support, and actually, I wrongly made quite a lot of assumptions about that, which was, I think you touched on it earlier. I actually thought you were quite introverted because you were study almost. You were very academic when it came to writing, and I was thought this is fantastic. We've got a great person who can help with the editorial and the marketing, and then off you go. But actually, there is a risk. And this is a leadership podcast, so I'm talking to the leaders here. There is a risk, and you can pigeonhole people. And credit to you for coming to me and saying, "Look, you might not think I am, but I am a people person. I am more of an extrovert." And obviously, I did my bit, but it was actually you who came to me and asked for that, and I think that's made all the difference, because you're right. As soon as I saw you in that role, then it's like an epiphany on my side. It's like, wow, you've just actually got two amazing superpowers, not just one. And now you're not doing any of the writing, and you're delivering for us, really well. So
my observation of what you've just described is the difference between leadership and management, which we've talked about before. So a manager will basically give you a task, tell you what to do, and you go and do it, and they think they know how to do it. What you're describing is leadership, which is you don't feel like you know the right way to do. You might feel like you know the right way, but you're actually open to other alternatives, and you're listening to the people that are working with you, and you're prepared to adapt and change and shift. And I think that, back to this being a leadership podcast, I think for me, that's one of the key messages is listening. You've got to listen.
Yeah.
I think if I can say something to the leaders too, I think that one of the things that made it possible for me to do that is knowing that I could speak to Chris, because I know several people in my generation who have got these problems. They don't trust their boss, they don't trust their manager, and so they think, oh, I'll just hold on to it and I'll just quit in 3 months or something like this. Like that's a very common kind of conversation piece to have, is someone saying, I can't be bothered to deal with all the drama of saying this problem I'm having. I'd rather just deal with it for a few more months and then leave and find another role. And I think that's something that should be really managed, because it is actually very, very common. You hear that a lot. Whereas there are other people I know, like myself, who feel comfortable going to the manager and saying, I would like to change this, that, the other. And it helps you want to stay there, which so ultimately it's a way to kind of help retain the talent that you want to retain, because knowing that I can do that made me more comfortable with staying in the role.
Well, look, before my head doesn't get through the door, I think I better move on. But that was all fantastic, and hopefully, a bit of an appeal to leaders to look after their people, and some really good insight in there. So, on to the questions. If you do have a question for us, then the inbox is podcast@generationcfo.com, who produced this podcast, and you can reach out to Mike and myself on LinkedIn. And this week we've got a question from, it was a previous Lunch and Learn, actually, that we had. It didn't come up today. We did have some community chat, but I thought, as Liv, you were on, I would ask this one, which is, why do people join community, and how do I develop a supportive network? I think this is a bit of $1 million question for us, but it would be interesting to sort of have a quick chat about it. What's your take? Why do people turn up?
I think people are very complicated. I think when you work in a community role, you can just see that everybody's got a different motivation for something. And I think something that's made my job, easier is I try to be as perceptive as possible. I try and listen in and try and work out what that reason for doing something is, because it helps me support them, in the community. But I think if I'm thinking about things that come up a lot, like I said earlier, I think connection, meeting other people. I think leadership roles can be very isolating, and I think especially forward thinking, quite thinking outside of the box as a leader can also be quite isolating if your team's not there with you, if the, leadership team is not there with you. So in our community, at the very least, I think people want to come and find those same-minded people who are also in leadership roles, because you're not going to find that, you might not find that within your own company, and you might not be able to be as open about the things you're dealing with or the things you're happy about or not happy about if you're talking within your own company. So I think finding those new contacts, finding people who are in the same space as you, maybe having the same problems or have resolved the same problems, I think that's a big deal. And I also think finding people to enjoy things with. We have an exec membership, and we had a partnership recently with another event, and we gave some tickets out, and they went together and they took a selfie there together, and it was really nice to see. We've made that connection, and they're actually going out there without us even being there and having a good time together, enjoying content that's relevant for them together. So yeah, I think enjoying things together, working things out with people who you might not be able to meet in other instances. And then you also said something about how to get value out of it. I think as anyone who's in a community, this is a message for you. Go out and involve yourself in it. Like, you're going to get out of it what you put in. And that doesn't mean you have to do a lot of work. That doesn't mean you have to, fulfill an obligation, but going to that event that you have a spare hour for, a virtual event, or going to that event the evening after you're in, London for work. I think just getting out there helps you get the most out of it. So yeah, that's my kind of overview of that.
So I agree with all of that. I'd just go back to your initial question, Chris, which is, why do people join community and how do I develop a supportive network? I would turn that around and say everybody needs a supportive network. So everybody in their role, in their life, in their whatever, needs that network. And one of the ways of getting that is by joining a community. And actually the community, as Liv's just outlined, can give you a lot of that. You may not need one, but I bet you probably do. So I think for me, it's almost like the questions answer themselves. One of the ways of getting a supportive network is joining a community and joining the right community.
Love it. Well, look, I'm not going to comment on that because it will sound like I'm sort of advertising. So I'll leave it there. But really, really interesting stuff. And I'm conscious of time. So let's go on to good data, bad data. And Mike, I see you've been looking at walls recently.
Well, kind of, or Giuseppe's newsletter again, right, is another way of looking at it. So I was literally just flicking through Giuseppe's newsletter and saw a picture of the underground map pre Harry Beck. And just wanted to go, good data is the way that the underground map these days has been designed and is produced as a systems map. So it doesn't relate necessarily to geography in the same way as other maps. And it's just an amazing thing. Next time you're on the underground or on the internet, just look up what the real map looks like, i.e. what an underground map geographically looks like, and then look at the Harry Beck designed thing. It's just amazing.
And that's how it looked originally. It was basically true to its geography, but it just was a mess, a spaghetti of color. Yeah, absolutely. I really love it, and obviously Harry Beck, is a bit of a legend in the design world, which I think is fantastic for sure. I actually heard there was a comedian talking the other day about there's a correlation between how good the public transport is and how much the population drinks. So apparently the more you drink, the better the public transportation is, which
that's borne out actually by the amount of people that you see in pubs in London on a weekday evening compared to the amount of people we see in pubs anywhere else in the country on a weekday evening. Correlation or causation, who knows?
Well, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, all good data, and but bad data. I want to finish up on. Obviously, I've got a bit of an interest in the accounting profession, and accounting giants KPMG have been fined £20 million after senior partners and managers cheated in their exams. Who'd have thought? After paying all those big bucks to the Big Four, cheating their way through the system. So. I'll leave it at that because obviously I don't want to get into trouble. But that is the headline. Apparently, mandatory training over a number of years was sort of, there was improper sharing of the answers, which isn't very ethical in such a ethical profession. But hopefully, this will improve things by getting such a whopping fine.
I love that one. That's just hilarious. I mean, you would have thought if anybody could have hidden the evidence, they would have been able to. But hey, so the one more is I just found it, saw it on X, formerly known as Twitter, which is the new way of calling it, I think. Just this picture, which is two people sat in a car, and the question being asked, why is the speedometer stuck on 35? And the answer being, the car only collects speed data once a year. And I thought that just in the linking to our conversation around the dynamic nature of the workplace, how things are changing so rapidly, actually the fact that sometimes we're only measuring stuff like quarterly or half yearly or annually may not necessarily be the best data to use to make decisions. Sometimes we might need some stuff that's a bit more live, let's say. So that was it.
Love it. Well, all a bit random, but a nice way to finish off. But Liv, thank you very much for being here today and representing Gen Z and representing Gen CFO. I really appreciate that, and thank you for all of the kind words. I'll pay you later.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It wasn't intended to be that much of a plug set for us, but yeah, no, I've had a great time here and I've enjoyed this podcast too. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. So yeah, just a bit of a wrap up. We we have solved the problem with Gen Z. Just find your purpose and then off you go.
Identifying it as a problem is probably a problem.
Okay, one for the edit. Find a community, because we all need that in our lives, and yeah, and enjoy being a leader and not just a narrow-minded manager when it comes to your talent. So all good stuff. Anyway, that's a wrap. So thank you, Liv. Thank you from me. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, everyone.
And remember, it's not all about the numbers.